Well, build my gallows and build them high. Makes a long time climbing before I die. I want the chance that's buried in his eye. Well, they gave me bars, but I can see between to a dusty yard and a long gone green. They call that freedom, if you know what I mean. And I drown my sorrows, but the whiskey's gone. I'm sober as good.
Hello everybody, welcome to Longbangers. This is episode 155 or 155 if you prefer. Joined tonight by John. John, how you doing?
Good. I'm conscious sometimes that when you start the recording and we get the wee Wi-Fi at the start that says, "Oh, this session's been recorded," whatever, I make a face, and I caught myself doing the Sean Maloney eyes for a second there when things started disappearing on the screen.
Somebody will be on YouTube and they'll freeze frame it and we'll find it on Twitter in a couple of days' time, I'm sure, John. How's your weekend been?
With your editing skills.
It'll not be me for my editing skills.
I know weekend's been really, really good, quite relaxing. I don't know if I would say that we enjoyed the weather because it's been a bit wet at times, but no, other than that, done a few things with the wife, the bear and the dog, so ticked a few boxes. What about yourself?
It's been decent. We went to Dundee to see Noel Gallagher last night with my mate Stevie. That was good gig. We were meant to be staying over, but the wee guest house that we'd booked, Cloisterbank in Dundee, Cloisterbank House, I think it's called. Fuck them, don't stay with them. They emailed us on the morning about 11 o'clock to say we've double booked you and cancelled the booking, which was nice of them. I think what has happened, and this is just my gut feeling, I can't prove anything, is that they've realised that they could have sold that room much more expensively than they did when we booked it months ago. And so they've just patched us out the fucking room. So Stevie had to drive instead, which was a bit of a shame because we had a good day out planned. So
bastards.
Bastards. The gig was decent enough, a bit slow to start with, but once they hit his groove and kind of started rattling out the Oasis songs, it was good.
Was it Noel Gallagher and his High Flying Birds, or was it just billed as Noel Gallagher?
His High Flying Birds. There's a tribute act for them. It's called Noel Gallagher's High Flying Carpets, which I always thought was a decent name for a tribute band.
Was he a roadie for Spiral Carpets or something? Is that how Oasis ended up getting started? That's quite clever.
Aye. Anyway. Right, tonight obviously there's no football to talk about because we're not going to talk about the Scotland game because A, I never watched it, and B, fuck it, brutal. It'd just be depressing talking about it. So what we're going to cover on tonight's Longbangers is the Rocky Bashiri situation at Hibs, which I think warrants a little bit of conversation. And then also we have signed in the last week Lewis Miller and Mamadou Bojang on loan for a year. So we'll cover that off. So start off with Rocky, John. Now just to set the scene with this one, Hibs announced about a week ago, in fact just over a week ago, because we talked on Longbangers last week, a number of players were leaving, including the loan players, Sylvester Jasper and have I got that the right way around? Yeah, Sylvester Jasper.
Aye.
Yep.
Well done.
I said it and I was like, oh fuck, I bet that's the wrong way around. And Rocky Bashiri. And then the day that we announced Mamadou Bojang, we also then announced Rocky Bashiri had signed another contract, and it transpired, and Hibs put this in their statement, which baffled me, that he was signed because of he made enough appearances that triggered a clause in the loan agreement that meant we had to buy him. And I felt a wee bit sorry for him that they put that statement in. I think if they'd just said, having reviewed the situation, Lee Johnson wanted to make him a permanent signing, that probably would have went down a bit better than it did. What did you make of the whole thing?
Oh, well, I think there's maybe a couple of things to pick up on what you just said. So it's maybe worthwhile covering Hibs' original statement, because when we talked about it last week, it was, I think it covered Scott Allen and there were 5 other players, so 6 contracted players that left the club. And then Hibs, in that post on their website or statement, whichever way you want to look at it, said that Hibs would also like to place on record its gratitude to the loan players that contributed last season: Rocky Bashiri, Sylvester Jasper and James Scott. Like, that didn't say one way or another what the situation was, but you can understand that the fans would assume that that's them, they're gone, like they're not returning. And I think, to be fair, like when we talked about it on Longbangers, we were all of the same opinion as well. So it was a wee bit of a surprise then. A few days later, Rocky Bushiri signed, and as you say, there was the detail in it, which was that, in fact, I'll get it up just to make sure that I'm not misquoting anyone. 22-year-old centre-half is penned a 3-year deal with the club after an option in his original loan agreement was triggered through a certain number of appearances. The terms of the agreement will remain undisclosed. I don't think there's any detail on the rest of it that we need to cover. I wonder, so the bit that I was curious about was what you said, like if Hibs had maybe sold it differently, if the fans' reaction would have been different. But I wonder, based on the reaction that you saw on social media, and I know that social media isn't reflective of the wider Hibs support, but certainly amongst the Twitterati, if you want to call them
Twitterati, yep.
They weren't. I don't think it would have mattered how they sold it. They would have just been displeased with Rocky signing. But it also makes me wonder. So the bit about the signing a contract after a certain number of appearances, like triggered a clause in the loan contract. Like we always knew with Bushiri and Jasper, I don't know about James Scott, that they were on loan with a view to signing, and they could have been signed at any point. So I think there was opportunities last year, despite the injuries that we had. Like McGregor was still sitting on the bench. Hibs would have known about the clause, and Hibs have continued to play Rocky despite the clause. So that kind of suggests to me that Hibs always wanted him. Like I know that there's something about the wording in the statement and whatever, but I can't see beyond that. But do you agree? Do you disagree?
So I think some of it comes down to semantics, because I think we could read bits here and there, and I believe Hibs knew. But I don't think Hibs were unaware of the clause. But I think Hibs thought they had an out for it. So even though he'd played the games, I think they thought they weren't obliged to follow through with the signing. And then I think it turned out then that they were obviously obliged to do it. So I don't know whether it was an option that was triggered or an obligation that was triggered or what. But I think he played mostly out of necessity, didn't he, last season? Like when he played it, I mean, you could look at would he have had as many games appearances had Hamlin been fit the whole time, or had Porteous been available the whole time? Well, probably not. But the fact was Hamlin was injured a bit and Porteous was suspended a bit. So therefore, you're kind of looking at our options being a wee bit limited as to who we could play. So I think he played more out of necessity rather than anything else. But
even though McGregor was an option.
I don't know how McGregor's fitness was either for that time, and obviously the other thing to kind of consider is we weren't safe until very late in the season. For getting pulled into a relegation scrap, we got that kind of win, a post split against St Mirren, and that sort of made us all right. So I don't think we could have taken a chance with players. I think it's an odd one with Rocky, and I suppose we'll talk about the merits of his the merits of the signing and what we think his abilities probably in a wee minute. But Hibs, they played him for a reason. They brought him into the club for a reason, and they put that clause in the contract for a reason. So if you remember, when the loan deals were done and announced, Hibs made a bit of a fanfare about the fact that we had the option to buy. As if these weren't normal loan agreements. These were safeguarding the club. So if I think I can't remember if it was Ron Gordon or Ben Kensel that said it. Ron Gordon kind of framed it as a try before you buy.
If I remember rightly, it was. I remember Ben Kensel talking about it in his interview with Down the Slope. Pretty sure there was chat about that, because I remember it wasn't a case of we need to wait till the end of the season to buy them. We can do it at any point. So that's what makes me think that it was definitely the down the slope interview.
Because there was some eyebrows raised at length of the contract as well. It's a 3-year deal, but I would presume that was agreed at the time of the loan. If they basically said, if we decide to make it permanent, these are the terms that you'd be signing on, and the player's going, I'm happy with that. So
that kind of makes me think as well, like, say for example, that had to have that clause, I wonder if the clause said we had to give him a certain length of contract, or just that we had to give him a contract if we triggered the number of games, because the length of contract, I don't know if there's any minimums that the PFA, for example, insist upon, but presumably it could have been a year. And then you have the option, like, presumably if Hibs found themselves caught out, as you said before, like through contractual outs, then maybe they could have let him go on like a Bosman or a pre-contract or whatever you call it these days.
I think it was. I think the terms were agreed, so the player's happy with it. So basically, all that happens is Hibs go at whatever point, we'll trigger that option now, and that player's confirmed and he signs for us. Because otherwise, you could end up in a situation. So you take we did it with Canberra, if you remember. So Canberra came on loan, and we had a fee agreed for his purchase. And so when that came around, Hibs had only had to match that fee that was agreed at the time of the loan, but then had to agree terms with Canberra. And there were other suitors, but Canberra wanted to stay at Hibs, so we were able to complete that signing. But other teams were able to kind of come in and say, well, we want to sign you as well, and give a bit of competition. Whereas in this situation, I think as soon as Hibs agreed the deal, if Hibs wanted to push on with it, then Rocky's committed to it, the selling club are committed to it, and we're committed to it. And in this case, when a certain number of games was played, that triggered all of that by the look at it.
Aye. It's maybe an odd question, because we're kind of, by asking it, I'm overlooking the idea that Rocky could be a Hibs player next season and actually like compete in the starting 11. But I think it's Disco Stu, one of the subscribers, had suggested that like we won't actually see him play for Hibs next season. Hibs have signed him, but we'll immediately try and move him on.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's any merit in that.
Yes, I think so. I think see if you look at, I'll try to get the statement up. Lee Johnson's wording on the official site for the announcement that Rocky was.
I've got it here if you want me to read it on your behalf.
Yeah, please. I think he said something.
This is just for the same one about the same statement about Bashiri signing. So it just said that Hibs manager Lee Johnson said Rocky has a lot of attributes to be successful in his career. He has obvious strengths, and it'll be interesting to see how quickly he can adapt to a new playing style. Head of recruitment, Ian Gordon added, Rocky's just 22, he's played over 80 senior matches and has a lot of room for improvement. I think there's a few Hibs fans that will maybe agree that there is a lot of room for improvement. He also went on to say that we believe we can add value to him that will benefit the club in the future. Is that the statement that you were thinking?
Yeah.
Like the wording. What's in that makes you think that he'll not be at Hibs?
So, if you took, I'm just going to compare it with what the manager said about Mamoudou Bojang. He says, we welcome Mamoudou to the club with open arms. There was a lot of interest in him from Portugal, Sweden and in the MLS, but he chose Hibs to be his home. He's a player that's incredibly hungry to succeed, and I'm looking forward to seeing how quickly he can adapt to the Scottish game. I'm really pleased that we have an option to turn his loan into a permanent transfer, as it gives him an added incentive to be a real success for us. Now,
so do you think just like the number of words, the sort of strength and conviction, I'm hopefully not putting words in your mouth there, but certainly it sounds like there's more in that statement about Mamoudou Bojang than there is about Rocky Bashiri signing. Correct.
Like this is one's a signing that we wanted to happen, and another one is a signing that happened.
So this is the thing that I have a wee bit difficulty with. So I was talking about the Twitterati before, and there was like plenty in the way of I'm going to try and be diplomatic here and say criticism towards the signing, and I actually can't remember if there was any towards the person, but he's a Hibs player. Regardless of what we're talking about, and there might be details as to whether they're factually accurate or not. So Hibs getting the contract wrong or whatever the get out clause was. or whether he might be moved on. But at the moment, as it stands, he will strip up for Hibs next season.
Mm-hmm.
How can we not just support him?
Of course, we should support him, John. I mean, this is the thing, right? Of course, that, and I would hope that goes without saying that if he's pulling on a Hibs jersey, then we would back him, Joe, as we would with all the players. You can go and try and get behind them as much as possible. And actually, we'll probably have a wee talk about his time so far in a Hibs jersey, and how much that can be attributed to his own abilities, but also how the team was doing at the same time, because that's probably a factor as well.
I think that's maybe the biggest factor. Like last season, I'll be honest, there's a lot about last season that I can't remember, because particularly towards the end, we had a laugh about it, in as much as you could have replaced particularly any of the bottom six fixtures.
Mm-hmm.
You could have replaced any bit of chat from week to week with any game, and you wouldn't have noticed the difference. Like, we could have taken a week, about 6 weeks off, and no one would have noticed the difference if we just played a previous episode. But by and large, since, try to think, so it seemed that it started to go wrong after the Porteous sending off at Ibrox, and it probably got really, really bad. The Livingston game prior to, I think, when Jack Ross was sacked. Jack Ross was still in charge at that point, and then Sean Maloney, it never got any better from that point. There's an argument is to say that it gotten worse. Like, it was just shit. It was a really, really shit season. And on the one hand, you can say that the players that played contributed to that shit season. But when Bushiri came in, Hibs were already on a downward spiral. Every player that came in, I say every player. So when you look at out of the three loans, Bushiri, Jasper, Melkerson was the permanent signing, I think, in January. He came into a shit show, got a couple of goals, didn't really work out elsewhere. It was just shit. Mm-hmm. But I think it was maybe last week when I was talking about like the new season. There's things for me to be excited about. Like, maybe I'm one of the rare few, but I didn't tend to really hold grudges against him. So last season was shit. Draw a line under it. Yeah, got the new manager, new strip, new players coming in, all that sort of stuff to look forward to. Bushiri could play a part in that.
Well, this is it. Sorry, carry on.
No, I was just going to say Bushiri could play his part in a successful season. Mm-hmm. Every player could. Every player, like, so if you really want to set the cat amongst the pigeons, that initial statement that Hibs released about like putting on, thanking the loan players that had, their contracts had expired and they'd gone back to the clubs or whatever, we might still see Jasper come back. Dave Graham might get his wish and get James Scott back. Like, that could all still happen.
John, come on. Don't say these things. Well, Jasper came and tweeted out a good luck Hibs for the future tweet. So I think he's definitely not coming back. So there are a few other things at play that you could consider, right? So there's the timing aspect. I'm just thinking of the two statements. So these are the players that are all leaving. So at that point, the terms of the loan mean that he's no longer on loan to Hibs. And so Hibs say, we thank him very much. But the contract hasn't been signed, so he's not a Hibs player yet. So you could just be, it's just a kind of question of timing. Had we done the signing bit a week earlier, we say his loan's coming in, but we've signed him permanently. We do that in the same statement. But because that bit's not completed yet, Hibs have got no option but to say, well, we kind of leave it open. He's no longer a Hibs player, so these players' loans have ended. And then later on, contract gets done and they announce it, right? So you do. There's a kind of tenuous get out there for Hibs if you were being kind. And then the other thing, when I was thinking about the strength of the wording on the statements, so not just what Lee Johnson was saying, but also that comment about we did this because our appearances trigger was met, and then so we had to do the signing. I wondered if Hibs and the social media team perhaps were conscious of how the news would go down. And so rather than giving them the big fanfare that you would give a signing normally, say like, hi, Joe, it's brilliant, Rocky's back and all the rest of it, they've just went, right, we know what the mood music's going to be like for this signing, so we'll just kind of play it low key, we'll explain what's happened, and then that's that, and then hopefully folk will just go, fair enough, and then move on. I don't think it really had that effect, but I wonder if they were just trying to kind of play to the expected mood.
So that I'm trying not to like almost feel like when we dissect statements that we're almost getting into like House of Cards or some sort of like he said, she said, diplomatic, like dancing around the handbags a little bit.
John,
because I know
it's pre-season, we're filling time, right? That's all that's happening here.
But
there's no football to talk about.
I think there's a genuine conversation to be had. So like we're talking about like the merits of two statements, like the strength of one and the apparent weakness of another. So there's the head of recruitment, Ian Gordon, was saying like he's just 22, played over 80 senior games. We believe we can add value to him that'll benefit the club in the future, like that. If Hibs were to then sell him before the season started, there's people among the support that are going to be pointing at it saying, you're fucking shit at your job, like you didn't care what you're doing, especially with what we were talking about just now about Hibs thinking that they had a get out clause that overruled the appearance clause that didn't work. Like it just like there's stuff within it that makes me think that there's questions there, but I don't know them. I don't know if anything about that is factually accurate or not. I can only go on what's written down. But I do take your point about the fact that I think the mood amongst the Hibs support, certainly amongst the Twitterati, was going to be that they would go fucking tonto that Bashiri had signed. So they had so that's probably reflects a lot of what Lee Johnston's, or at least I think that's what reflects a lot of what Lee Johnston had said. And I'm definitely going to call him G. Lonson at some point in the future.
Lonson, it's bound to happen, isn't it? So if we take the signing as something that, if you give the benefit of the doubt and say Hibs wanted it to happen, right, and they go, right, that's fine. We knew if we played him that many times, we would be obliged to sign him. We were happy with that situation, so we played him because they could have not played him. That would have been an option. There were other players that could have stepped in, I suppose, changes to the formation or whatever to allow for it. What was it you think that Hibs saw in Rocky last season that made them think this would be a good permanent signing to make?
This is going to sound a wee bit like mind that Ross County game, but I think when Bashiri made his debut against Motherwell, he was up against, who's the boy that used to play for us? Was it Jordan Roberts, plays for Motherwell?
I'll say yes, but I don't know.
Jordan Roberts. I think he's a bit of a handful, and you've got Kevin Van Veen that played up front for them. So I don't think Bashiri was fully fit that day. I'm sure he had a wee bit of strapping going on, and he got stuck in. He was more than a physical match for both those players, albeit he did get chucked into the what looked like a quite painful impact against the advertising boards. You know, the ones that they've got like sort of sitting at an angle behind the away end at Fir Park. I think he does have attributes, and I think at that point he came in and he had something. He wanted to show off a wee bit, like because it was his debut for the club. But as I say, by that point, the club, the football team, just on a downward spiral, and I think you could argue that he got sucked down along with everyone else. I do think that he's got attributes. I do, and I'd like to see him perform in a better Hibs team, because I think how do I put this? I think we're too quick sometimes as supporters to just point a finger and say, you're absolutely fucking shite, you're the worst football player I've ever seen. And it's often when everyone is having a shit time. Yes. It's never just one particular player. Like, so you saw some of the comments about like Chris Mueller, like fucking off back to the MLS with his tail between his legs. Like, it didn't work out for Chris Mueller here. Just didn't. Yeah. Trying to think of the other players. I will continue to defend Josh Vela until my dying day, because I think he had attributes to be a player as well, and I would have liked to have seen him in a better Hibs team. Same with a lot of players. Sometimes the players that you get in a team are better than the teammates that they've got around them. or better, or certainly better than the circumstances that the team finds itself in.
Yeah.
And the circumstances that the Hibs team found itself in last year was just shit, and it'd been shit for a while. And I think it stemmed back to like failing to sign a defender and a striker, and possibly beyond that.
Mental. Well, he's 22, right? And I think last season, like you say, his debut was decent. They played the Derby at Easter Road and had a good game in that match. Remember, it was 0-0. We looked pretty solid defensively. And I thought Rocky had a good game. Sure, he wasn't the one that passed back, or was he? Well, I think there was one that we nearly sold the pies. Dabrowski, I think, handled the pass back, and then they got a free kick for it. I can't remember if it was Rocky that passed the ball back
or not. Does that mean that there was 2 indirect free kicks at Easter Road last year in the same box?
In the same box, yeah.
Huh.
I can't remember if it was him or not. My memories know what it used to be. But I think so. He's powerful, and he's got that sort of physical presence. He's quite quick. I think where he's lacking is that control. You look at how poachers can bring the ball out of defence, and when Rocky does it, it looks like it's all very accidental.
Yep.
The other thing to note, and this would go for all the defenders last season, was we never had a settled back 3 or back 4 all season because there was either players injured or suspended. And I think defence is one of the, particularly centre-half positions, is one of the key areas where you need a bit of consistency in your team selection. So I think if you're a manager who believes in squad rotation, probably you don't rotate your goalkeeper and you don't rotate your defence unless you absolutely have to, because you want them function as a solid unit and knowing what each other's game is. And you look at when we had McGregor and Hanlon as our centre halves, or Hanlon and Porteous, we looked solid because they know if one's going for the ball, the other one's dropping back to kind of mop up. I think if you're chopping and changing the whole time, you lose a bit of that kind of confidence in the other defender, and it affects your own game. And I think Rocky probably fell foul to that. I think he was also kind of played right side of defence, left side as well, or sometimes the centre half and a 3. I just think he never really got a kind of fixed position or a run of games enough to kind of really show, to get that match sharpness up that players need. Because I don't think he played a lot of football before he came to Hibs. So I think that there could well be a player in there that we just haven't seen, like you said, in better circumstances with better management and a bit of consistency there. He might grow into a really solid player, and we might be looking back at this conversation in a year's time going, good bit of business putting that clause in. We were quite lucky that we did it.
Fine margins.
And the thing is, if you imagine the loan had gone a different way and he'd been outstanding, and we lost him because we hadn't played him the 15th time, or we hadn't put that clause in to say it, and then somebody came and, Aberdeen probably came and signed them from under our noses, everybody would be doing the fucking dinging about it. So I see the merit in the contract that Hibs put in place. I'm loath to kind of criticise for that side of it. I think it obviously hasn't quite worked the way everybody wanted it to work, but it does safeguard the club a bit for that kind of situation. That if you unearth a gem and you get them on loan.
Well, look at Didi Agath, however many years ago that was. You want to avoid that situation. And I suppose, like with every signing, every signing's a risk. Like the club presumably do their due diligence, like they do their medicals, like they do their scouting, whatever. But at the end of the day, like it does depend on how they perform on the pitch. And like the clause, for example, is out with Bushiri's control. Yeah. So like he's signed for Hibs.
I suspect he will play next season. I don't think we'll sell him before the.
Well, I don't know what the situation is with Hanlon's injury, but we know that I believe that he's had surgery, and the situation with regards to McGregor is unclear at the moment. Like certainly, like the last game of the season when he gave that post-match interview when he was talking about like the opportunity to like captain the club, and he was talking about like his kids getting to see him. Like it was that emotional. Like maybe it was just emotional because it was an emotional day. I got the impression it was maybe emotional because that was him. It was kind of time to hang up the boots and move into a coaching role. So we are short on defenders. And I think Porteous's time at Hibs is a little unclear at the moment. I think there's maybe been a contract offered that he's turned down, are the rumours.
Yeah.
So we might only have, by my count there, one fit defender, which is Rocky Bushiri.
Great. The transfer window's just open though, John. Like, there's still...
No, aye. So, like, at this time, like, it's Bushiri, I'm not saying that'll be the
plenty of movement to be
situation.
done, but... okay, right, we'll talk about other signings. Do you think this, before we go on, is that the sort of situation that only Hibs find themselves in? Like, you signed somebody by accident?
No, because there was that. I think it's a football fan thing rather than a Hibs fan thing, but I do think that football fans, whichever club they support, you think, fuck, it could only be us, whoever that us happens to be. But there was that example from Italy recently where a manager had a clause in his contract. I'm sure it was Italy.
Yeah,
a manager had a clause in his contract that if he got sacked, he got an extension. And I cannot for the life of me work that
out. Who signed that one off?
Because would you know just go out your way to get sacked?
Aye.
So you got
just mental, eh?
Aye, nuts.
Aye, I take that on board, so I take back, not just Hibs. Okay, right. So we also signed Mamadou Bojang. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So Gambian, we've signed him on loan with an agreement to sign him if it works out. John, you're a big expert in Gambian football. What do you know about the player?
Everything. No, I can't fuck all. I probably saw the same video that everyone else saw, which is that maybe like 60 seconds worth of footage where he scores a goal. But if for no other reason than we're trying to fill that close season void, it did remind me of a Kevin Nisbet finish. So, like the ball, I think maybe came over the shoulder. He caught it on his right foot.
Yeah,
stuck at bottom corner. So that reminded me a bit of Kevin Nisbet. So, that's as much as I can say that I know or I've seen about him.
So I know he was getting, Hibs were getting a bit of stick for it. Right, so his career began with Birikama United FC in Gambia before he made the switch to Senegalese side Casa Sports.
Is this because he signed from Rainbow FC?
Rainbow FC. Somebody said you can't even find them on Google. Which I was like, right, it shouldn't matter. Like, players have to start somewhere. Right? It's like you can't sign everybody for like fucking AC Milan or whatever.
This is the thing, right? So you've got Rainbow FC. You can't find them on Google. I can't remember who it was that tweeted about it. I hope it's someone that listens to the show so that they recognise it. But it was talking about Ivan Sproul. Like when we signed him for like $5,000, a bag of footballs, and like I don't know, a box of colour. Who had heard of Institute FC before he'd signed? Like it feels a wee bit sort of snobby.
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing. Like, I'd imagine if you can't find them on Google, that there's maybe other teams, other scouts who are using Google that can't find them that maybe aren't going to the same lengths that Hibs are to try and find the gems, because we're not operating in the same sort of, well, we're not even operating in the same transfer market as other teams in our league, like in terms of Rangers and Celtic. So we maybe need to go a little bit further afield and maybe need to look at other leagues to try and find these players. Find the players that are going to benefit Hibs.
I thought it was quite an exciting one. Do you know, it's just like a complete wild card, really, isn't it? Like you're kind of going totally out of the blue. Nobody had any wind of the signing in advance. Apparently, it was a player that Lee Johnson was tipped off to. Like one of his contacts. I don't know how true that is, but that's I'd heard that you should have a look at signing this player, and Hibs went and did the research on him and then made it happen.
I'm just going to throw this out there as pure speculation, but Lee Johnson talked about in his interview with, I think it was the different podcasts. He talked about the City Group and I think some of his own transfer networks. So I'm thinking about maybe some of the players that play for like Man City and that. I wonder if they've got contacts in the Gambian league.
Well, they'll have obviously the City Group have got a worldwide network. I mean, they literally will leave no stone unturned to find a player because they've got the resources to do it. So if we get a wee nod,
do you think the fact that Hibs have had experience with a Gambian footballer before is also something that's held against Mamadou before he's even even set foot in his mains.
Well, I think you've helped him out by describing him as the Gambian Kevin Nisbet, because the last one was described as the Gambian Roberto Carlos.
Roberto Carlos. So I've maybe lowered the expectations a little bit.
And so you probably have a bit more, like you say, a bit lower expectations if you're just trying to emulate Kevin Nisbet. No offence to Kevin Nisbet, but he's no Roberto Carlos.
No.
As it turned out, neither was Package Happy, but never mind. I think it's interesting when, again, we look at the statement. Ian Gordon said his data matches the positional profile that Lee Johnson wants from his attacking players and is determined to reach his potential. So I can't remember if it was Ben Kensel when he was talking it down the slope and had Ian Gordon, and they were talking about using data to back up judgment. So it's almost that sort of, does the data back up what your eyes are telling you? Mm-hmm. And they'll have an idea. So Lee Johnson talked about players that could run all day, kind of thing. You know, they're fast and they're powerful and stuff like that. And I think when you looked at the wee video, that looked like it is some attributes that Bojang would have.
I can't remember from the video if he showed this. However, I would be happy provided he's got a bit of pace, because one thing that we really missed last year. Maybe not just when Martin Boyle left, but just in generally, like Martin Boyle, it seemed like at times was the only player that had pace in the Hibs team. Everyone else was a bit, I wouldn't say pedestrian, obviously, but it was a bit samey. Like no one had any out and out pace that was able to like run beyond a player.
Yeah. So
if we can get that from Momadou, then it can only be a plus for Hibs.
Yeah, and then the other sign that we made was Lewis Miller, and right back, Australian. What do you make of that?
That's an interesting one as well, isn't it? Like, I don't think we've done too badly out of Australians, and I wonder if, again, like I'm old enough to remember when Hibs signed, I think was it an Australian indoor internationalist. But when you think about like Mark Milligan, Mark
Who is that?
I forget the boy's name, but it was under McLeish. Like that's how long ago it was. But certainly in recent years, maybe there's a bit of a question mark over Jackson Irvine. I thought Mark Milligan did okay. Martin Boyle obviously adopted Australia as his home country, but for argument's sake, I'm going to include him. And then we're all really happy with Harry Clark's contribution last year, and I think it'd be fair in saying that most of us would be disappointed if he was to leave.
Yep.
Or if he wasn't to turn out for Hibs next year. So the fact that Hibs have picked up another Australian under-23 international looks good.
Are you classing Harry Clark as Australian?
Is he not? He's Australian, isn't he not?
He's sure in English.
No, he's Australian.
Is he?
Tell me, I thought he was Australian. Have I just made an absolute fucking cunt of this? I
don't think he is, John. Maybe I've made the cunt of it, but I don't think Harry Clark is Australian. I think he's English.
Oh shit, he was born in it. Fuck, just edit that, cut that.
No, I'm not cutting it. We'll keep it.
He's from Ipswich, New South Wales.
We did have Milligan, Jackson Irvine, Stuart Lovell as well. If you want to go back a bit further,
he plays for Australia. He was all right.
Yep.
So, well, apart from my fuck up, I think I stand by my comments.
There's an interesting thing as well. So he played last season for Central Coast Mariners.
It's Mariners, and the only reason I know this is that I've got a nephew out in Australia that has also played with a club that was kind of like a feeder club for Central Coast Mariners.
All right, there you go. But he had agreed a P contract with MacArthur FC, which I thought was a good name for a team. MacArthur.
Aye,
FC.
So that was the thing. Like, we've signed him from MacArthur FC technically, but he hasn't actually turned out for them yet. I think he just signed a pre-contract with them. So
this is something that imagine we'd signed a pre-contract with a player, and then somebody else signed them. So like everybody would be going fucking mental about it, like about how shite it was for Hibs to have done that. But here we're benefiting from a move like that, and everybody's got that's all right. Seems like a good move. They've got a bit of money out of it, I suppose. He looks a really solid player. We kind of looked at a few YouTube videos. I know the risk of watching stuff on YouTube is you only see the best bits, but it looks like he's got a wee bit of everything about him. Very powerful, fast. He's got a good bit of height about him. Important to have a bit of height about you as a player, I think, unless you're Russell Latipe or Mighty Mouse from off Roy of the Rovers, if you remember that.
I do. Hamish and Mouse. I used to read Roy of the Rovers.
Hamish, aye.
Brilliant.
I think Hearts has signed somebody else, like another defender for the same team, didn't they? Which is quite an interesting thing. I wonder what the odds of that happening were. I think they signed the centre half. I'm sure they signed the centre half and we signed the right back, which is weird. It
is, I suppose, like when you take into account like the size of the world, the leagues. How are two clubs in Edinburgh signing two players for the same club?
Let's have the same person tipping them off anyway. Yeah. And again, Ian Gordon, the terms of the deal makes it a no-brainer for us, and he has the attributes to fit into Lee Johnson's system. So again, it looks like a very deliberate, this is how we want to play, and this is a profile of player that will make us be able to play that way, or will help us be able to play that way. Which I think is an interesting and probably welcome way to sign folk. It's like if you're needing a fullback that does X, Y, and Z, you sign one that's got proven attributes to doing X, Y, and Z rather than just an available fullback, for example.
Definitely. Because God knows how many times we've been in the situation of signing journeyman to fill a gap. Like, I don't get the impression that we're doing that at the moment.
No. We were also rumoured to be signing Aidan McGeady. What do you make of that?
I'm not a fan of the rumour, of the possibility, and it's maybe just like a long-standing sort of prejudicial view towards players that are of that age, because I think like when I was growing up, like generally speaking, like players that were 36-year-old were starting to drop down the leagues, if not dropping down the leagues, they were hanging up their boots.
Yeah.
But more and more lately, players are playing for longer. So there's Ibrahimovic, I think, just won Serie A at 41-year-old.
He's in his early 60s now.
Early 60s. We've got Marshall at 38-year-old. I know that goalkeepers are a different breed. I'm trying to think of what else. I'm trying to think of other examples. Like Davy Weir, when he played for Rangers, he played until he was about 38-year-old or something. I suppose I'm curious because, well, just to get one other thing off my chest about my prejudice towards Aidan McGeady, it was the fucking dive at Easter Road that got him sent off.
That was
which actually probably isn't.
Nobody's first return to Easter Road, wasn't it? As Celtic manager,
it probably isn't so much towards Aidan McGeady, actually, now that I think about it, as it was towards Tony Mowbray and his after-match comments about he anticipated contact. Like, fuck off. Like, he dived. There was no contact. It doesn't matter whether he anticipated otherwise. The foul was never there. Fuck you. Do
you remember Graham Stackman into the huddle that day?
Yeah.
I thought it was an amazing thing to do.
I'm trying to remember, like, because he just sort of like snuck up behind him, didn't he? Like, stuck his head in. I can't remember if he got chased out or kicked out or what. But so I think about like the player that McGeady was when we saw him for Celtic. Because I'll be honest, like I never watched him when he was at Lokomotiv Moscow he went to, or CSKA.
Oh,
he went to Russia anyway. I asked my mate who is a Sunderland fan, and he said that he's probably been their best player for a couple of seasons. Like, he spent a bit of time out of the Sunderland team. I think it was maybe after Jack Ross was sacked and there was a new manager came in. I think the new manager was trying to put his stamp on the team, so he put Maloney in the reserves, and Maloney just basically bided his time because he knew that the boy that had come in was going to get emptied, and then McGeady was back in the team, and I think he had a good season. But I just think, how much is he going to contribute given his age, given the fact that I don't think he's played football since November, and I don't know the extent of his injury? It seems an odd signing if we were to make it.
Mm-hmm. I can't make up my mind for it, John. I'm sort of like right on the fence. I think there's quality there, right? So he's had a good career and he's been a good player through his career, and I think he's shown it recently enough to suggest that you'd get a season out of him. But you do have that concern that the older a player gets, the more difficult it is to reproduce that form. And I'm also keen that Hibs get some experience into the side because we sorely lack it, and our signing policy just now seems to be getting very young players in, players right at the start of their sort of senior career. You know, your 21, 22-year-olds or younger, and they need experience round about them to bring them on because, as Alan Hansen famously or infamously said, you don't win anything with kids, right? And although he's that's infamous because he got proved wrong, I think that Man United team was exceptional when they also did have some senior players in there to kind of.
Aye, it also wasn't a one-off. Like there was consistent success and there was infrastructure around it, and it was supplementing what was already there with, like you say, like with a bit of experience. But I think another thing, maybe like given his age, so maybe not so much his age, but you mentioned there, like you maybe get a season out of him. How is Aidan McGeady? How is one season out of Aidan McGeady any better than, say, a loan player, which I think we've all acknowledged has been poor for Hibs in the past?
Yeah, there is.
Like when it's just like getting loan players, like because you kind of have this successful season with a player there, and then like they're gone. Like there's no contingency there. So what, if we're going to get McGeady in for that year, I would say, well, what's the contingency plan and what's the player to step into his position after? I
suppose then you're looking at Ronnie Haggis or Daniel Mackay breaking through after him. So you don't expect to play McGeady for the full 38 game season. You maybe play him for 18 games and you are able to then bleed in the young players. Yeah,
I could get on board with that. But then maybe if we were to announce the signing, we get someone like yourself in to write the statement to sell it to me.
There we go. We'll get everybody on board. It'll be interesting. I think he's a good player. We'll wait and see whether anything comes of it, because it could just be kind of wind and pish, which sometimes these rumours turn out to be. But
usual caveat: it's nothing against Aidan McGeady as an individual. I'm just trying to be pragmatic about it.
Aye. Okay, right, we'll call that a night. So if you're a subscriber, you'll have Longbangers Extra Time, episode 10 to look forward to. So you look forward to inverted commas. Endure. Might be, I don't know. So we'll record that just now. What we're actually going to be talking about on Extra Time this evening is, can Hibs signing policy work at a club like Hibs? And the idea about signing young players with a view to kind of realising their sell-on potential and making loads of money from them and then investing that back into the club. So we'll have a wee chat about that, who we've signed so far and what the prospect is for success. So if you want to listen to that, and we do have some better topics that we've already talked about as well, they're all there for you in the back catalogue. Longbangers.hubwave.net. Go and subscribe. It's only £3 a month, which is about 40p an episode, if that. Less than that if you include the free ones that you get ad-free as well, so you don't have to listen to any of the adverts that you might have had to listen to at the start of this one if you're not already a subscriber. So longbangers.hubwave.net, go and subscribe, help us out, and get the extra content. Until then, thanks for listening, and we'll be back on Thursday with Short Bangers. Take it easy.
They trailed me down when I broke free. I drank all the whiskey in Tennessee.